Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for choosing to join us for Campus Debates, the final, the grand finale season, where we have teams from Strathmore University and Kenyatta University who have been able to debate all through the season and to make it to the finals. My name is Mercy Vugutsa, and welcome to the grand finale. To all our loyal viewers, thank you so much for keeping up with us consistently from the very onset of this season, where we had every single university within the Nairobi region represented in campus debates. Now, for this finals episode, I would like you to allow me to welcome the teams that are participating in the finals. From side proposition, we have Strathmore University. And from side opposition, we have Kenyatta University. As you have followed suit, from the teams we have on stage, majority of them have not lost a round in any of the episodes they have recorded. And I think because of that, you're pretty familiar with the speakers that are on stage today, which then means you are excited and I think ready for the very fiery episode you'll be able to get from Strathmore University and Kenyatta University. Without further ado, I will welcome the speakers to introduce themselves and most likely make their final shout-outs within this episode. Proposition.
Hello everyone, my name is Shamia Muchesia. I'm sure you guys have seen me so many times. Shout out to my mother, shout out to my father, my grandmother, and everyone at home. Shout out to Strathmore Debate Society and to the people I train. I think I see Kimani, Ndolo, Nika, and Mwendwa. So shout out to all those individuals. Very powerful people, yeah.
All right. Okay, hello everybody. My name is Jeff Melita. Founder and Managing Director of Aira Academy. Once again, it's a pleasure to be debating for you. Shout out to my parents, shout out to my siblings, shout out to the sport. I think we've done so much, we've grown so much as individuals. This one I'm training him next week, so shout out to him as well. So yeah, we're just looking forward to something great.
From side proposition, they get the opportunity to shout out and apparently train us of a few of the debaters we have on stage today, but even on the audience. I will welcome opposition to introduce themselves as well.
Okay, my name is Emmanuel Nyongesa, and I would like to give a shout out to my mom. I'd like to give a shout out to my siblings and more so to my classmates back in Kenyatta University, and also a big shout out to Mwendwa and the Kenyatta University Debating Society as a whole. It has been amazing.
Hello everyone, my name is John Mwendwa. Shout out, I like to give a shout out to my younger self. When I was a kid, I always wanted to be on TV. I don't know why, but I wanted to be on TV, so yeah, we made it. And shout out to my future self. We are going to be a big commodity in this industry.
And from side opposition, they get the opportunity to shout out to themselves, but at the same time, shout out to the Kenyatta University Debate Society. I think a fun fact, just before we get to hear from the judges, is that both the teams that are on stage today have won a tournament for themselves. From side proposition, the partnership that is before you, they have been able to win Olympia Championship, but also a plethora of debate tournaments that we've been able to have in Kenya, East Africa, and Africa in general. From side opposition, equally, we have a team that was able to win Kenya University's Debate Championship edition 2023, and I think they are one of the best debaters that we get to have as Kenya. You've heard from me, they are very good debaters. They are here to win the championship. I don't know who you think will win. Before we go to the judges, tell us, who do you think? Is it Strathmore? Is it KU? I would love to know from you as the audience who you think would win. Now with that, I welcome the judges to introduce themselves. And on the panel, we have a guest judge who has joined us for this recording particularly. We have Fanya Mambo Benjamin, part of the guest adjudication panel. I will allow him to introduce himself and maybe tell us why he goes by the name Fanya Mambo.
My name is Fanya Mambo Kinuthia. Yes, it's my name. Unaweza jaribu ile salamu ya Gen Z, you can send a shilling. Or confirm to you that that's my name. I am happy to be here as someone who at some point has lived off public speaking. So it's a good place to be. I am happy to see this. I mean, I competed at high school, at university, at every stage I had on a speaking competition, I was there. And I am happy to have been invited here. I'm humbled and honored. I'm looking forward to seeing what the gentlemen on stage have and hoping that, of course, in the future, we'll also have ladies competing as fiercely as, yeah.
Just before the rest of the judging panel gets to introduce themselves, I think it's a very big honor to have him as part of our panel based off of just his experience as someone who's been invited for a couple of shows on our television screens, and he's been able to converse with us in regards to what our political landscape as a country largely looks like. So I think it's also exciting, but at the same time, mnaweza msalimia kama amewakosea kidogo, but we welcome the rest of the panel to introduce themselves and tell us what they're expecting from the finals.
Hello, I'm Winnie Sydney Ombewa. Congratulations for reaching this far. I'm expecting a mind-blowing round, yeah, and all the best. Thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Tracy Anyango. I'll be your judge for this final round, and I just want to wish you all the very best, and I expect very good speaking skills from you guys.
My name is Brian Mwindi, and this is the finals. We expect 5-star speeches, and I'm just here to have a very, very good time. All the best teams.
Hi, my name is Nika Twin, and I expect to be wild.
My remarks begin in 3, 2, 1. My name is Hilary Matano. It's a pleasure to be sitting in this panel as the chair, and I look forward to very awesome speeches. All the best.
You might have noticed a bit of laughter when the chair for this round, Hilary Matano, mentioned that his remarks start in 3, 2, 1. I think it's a consistency within debaters. Every time before they start their speeches, they have to count themselves down. I think sometimes it's to relieve the pressure, but they always say it so that you can start the timer when they start. I don't know which is true. Now with that, you've had introductions, you've had the speakers, you've had the judges. I think you're ready for a debate. For the grand finals, the motion for this round reads, this House as the government of Kenya would prioritize economic development over political reforms. I repeat, this House as the government of Kenya would prioritize economic development over political reforms. I welcome first speaker proposition to start off the argument. Here.
The reason why His Excellency, the former president, Emilio Mwai Kibaki, was viewed as one of the people who was the most visionary leader who asserted and brought Kenya to the developmental phase is because one of his largest contributions to the citizenry that is the Republic of Kenya at this point in time is the economic infrastructure and the construction of proper and sound economic systems that exist within status quo. The reason why this guy here called John Mwendwa is going to go home to KU without a trophy is because of 3 reasons. Firstly, prioritization looks like a couple of things from proposition. Social engineering, it's a capital-intensive affair that is more than towards an outcome that is about improving what is the most proximate thing to Kenyans. Mwindi, I know you're hungry. You've not eaten since yesterday. If you're talking about political reform and that kind of protection that exists within that system, we would prioritize a government or a system, an economic structure that would then be able to put food in your stomach, even if it's just chapo beans, because we know you've not had this for a long period of time. We then seek to dispel this particular notion from these guys that this then looks like active deprioritization of political progression. This is simply because it is only profitable and it is only impactful. This political advancement is only profitable, meaningful, and impactful insofar as we can have this off of the bedrock of an economic revolution that exists within the country that is the Republic of Kenya. But I think even secondly, panel, this debate is incredibly outcome heavy. That means that opposition cannot merely assert things like the fire for change and, we want to create that progression and change the things that are, like corruption and be able to create structures and systems. They can't merely just say this. They must do the legwork to prove why these things are A, possible, but even secondly, in the best interest of the government of Kenya to do so. Nika, do you know the government of Kenya? You probably don't know your area MCA, but I can tell you now your area MCA is suffering. He's harming you directly because you probably don't get access to infrastructure. Your street probably looks horrible. Why? Because garbage collection and that kind of thing isn't something that these people prioritize. Matano, you're jobless. This then looks like we must prioritize a state that is interested in the self-protecting mechanism of improving people's individual capacity to improve their own livelihoods. But I think even secondly, remember, the government of Kenya has proven time and again, if the recent Gen Z protests are anything to go by, that it is incredibly self-protecting and self-protecting and self-propagating. This means with the monopoly of violence and the state machinery at its beck and call, why would this action of political reform be something that they would undertake, especially because they thrive off of the exploitation of the ethnic lines that exist within status quo and that kind of thing. From proposition side, we tell you that the counterfactual is something that these people would more likely buy into, simply because A, it would offer them opportunities to get re-elected, but even B, improves their lifestyle, their standing with regards to what the people view as when they look at these kind of people. Examples exist within status quo. A lot of sheds, a lot of infrastructure are built using things like the National Government Consolidated Fund. A lot of, in fact, they brand and say MCA Matano, MCA Sydney Ombewa built this particular thing and caused the economic progression. This is something that they would value from our end. But even most importantly then, panel, you must understand what economic reform looks like. It looks like 5 things, and this is why you guys go home with nothing. 1, improved taxation and fiscal policy. Secondly, investment in infrastructure. Thirdly, job creation and industrialization in and of itself. And the thing that is crippling us all here together, debt management and trade improvement. This then becomes vital because it is hinged on not who is in power, but on long-standing, permanent, shifting things that have the ability to create consequences that exist far beyond me and you, because we owe a debt not only to the current generations, but also future generations in and of themselves. We win this particular finals from proposition, and we win happily because we are able to demonstrate that there is a huge urgency challenge within status quo that is exacerbated by lack of resources and time. Matano, we don't know whether you're going to be here tomorrow because you did not eat yesterday. But even you who is here today, at least we are happy we can see you. Some people are dying in hospitals within this country. Some people are struggling because they are dealing with grappling hunger. They're struggling within poverty and that kind of thing. We believe that this is particularly impactful for those individuals, those suffering minorities, because for them, this lack of economic reform spells death. Other than the privileged who are seated here, the privileged like these people who can come here and tell us something like, political reform that is not guaranteed in and of itself. But even 5 foundational reasons then for why we win. I think firstly, it is foundational to political reform to have economic structures, which is a prerequisite for this meaningful engagement, because a prosperous economy is needed for democratic institutions to operate effectively. But even secondly, there exists the paradigm of sovereign economic autonomy that is needed for Kenya as a state. Notice that, when you're gaining money from debt and political reform and that kind of thing, these individuals are likely to impose systems and structures that will force you to operate within a certain way. If you take nothing, Nika, if you take nothing, Matano, if you take nothing, Bwanafanya Mambo, you want to get an economic reform that makes your life easier, that has the ability to make you provide not only for yourself, but for your defendants. Mwendwa, you lose this debate today.
As lovely as that first speech was from side proposition, I'm sure opposition can match up or possibly be better. With that, we welcome first speaker opposition to make their case. Here.
I think something interesting that Jeff's case is all about is he comes and tells you, you know what, Matano, you are jobless, Muindi, you don't have food to eat. So necessarily, once they have this economic development, you will stop sleeping hungry and all these of things. He sells you a utopia that all will necessarily be well. We don't think so. He doesn't tell us how. He necessarily just comes and fiats all of these things, and that's why they are going home. We think, panel, what does necessarily focusing on economic development and prioritizing economic development necessarily looks like. One, it looks like privatization of public sectors. This looks like the Kenyan government necessarily selling things like JKIA to Adani and all these sort of things. It looks like increasing taxes. We already have things like fuel levy, increasing the fuel levy, increasing taxes even on things like pads and all these sort of things. But it also looks like increasing things like college tuition and all these sort of things. But three, it also looks like you necessarily go to the extent of even borrowing loans from either domestically, from the banks domestically. This necessarily means that people don't have money. People cannot borrow money because the government has already borrowed money. But beyond that, it already means that you necessarily go outside the country and borrow from things like the IMF or the World Bank or something of the sort. We think this is necessarily harmful to the people of Kenya, and necessarily you won't have the job he is talking about, and Muindi will not eat the food he's talking about. We think then, one, the harms comes in two forms. One, we will have public backlash. Notice panel, at a point of time, Ruto has tried doing all these things he's talking about. He has tried increasing taxes. We have had the finance bill. So this looks like you will have like the public backlash in such a way that you have people like Okiya Omtata taking you to court and pulling down the finance bill of 2023 was pulled down because it was necessarily being bad to the Kenyan people. But two, we think largely it will necessarily lead to riots. We have people like Gen Zs who are more informed, who have the information, and who think they deserve like a better life, who necessarily are willing to go to the streets and protest against the government once you try doing all those things that they talk about. But three, we also think that one, it increases the debt burden. The debt burden for Kenyans increases. This looks like you necessarily, once you go to the IMF to do all these kind of things, you necessarily increase debts to Kenyans, whereby Ndolo is supposed to pay something, pay taxes. The severity measures directly affect people like Ndolo or directly affect people like Sophie. We think then that's already harmful to the people of Kenya and necessarily harmful to the government as a whole. But how does political reforms look like? One, we think political reforms in the Kenyan context right now necessarily looks like impeaching people like the deputy president who is Rigathi Gachagua. It necessarily looks like impeaching the Cleophas Malala, the former UDA Secretary General. But it also looks like implementing these judicial reforms. This looks like the judicial reforms that were implemented. These look like corruption, which ensured that corruption cases are done within 6 months. But B, it looks like compensating victims of protests. This looks like if George necessarily goes to the streets and is beaten, he necessarily is not going to be charged, but his charges will be dropped and necessarily he will be compensated. We think that's necessarily important. But it also looks like stopping government officials from doing business with the government to avoid conflict of interest. Notice, two things Jeff tells you is A, you know what, you need economic development and all this sort of things. He paints you, but what he does not know is that one, the richest people in Kenya are politicians. So at a point in time, you're even privatizing these things. It's not necessarily that Fanya Mambo is the one who is going to buy Adani. We'll have the richest people who are politicians going to buy these shares. They benefit, you don't benefit. You will always prioritize these things, the economy on paper, things like GDP, which necessarily you calculate with the richest person, you divide by the lowest person. I don't do economics, but at least I know that it will be something of the sort. We think then, why should we necessarily prioritize political reforms and anything of the sort? We think A, political reforms do not require a lot of money to implement. Notice, this means you don't necessarily need to pressure Kenyans with a lot of their money, and then you don't have backlash from the people of Kenya. You are likely to implement these things. But B, it does not take a lot of time to implement these political reforms. This means that the UDA government already has 2 years remaining in office. They are likely to have political reforms and like build infrastructure as they talk about you. By the time you build a road, 5 years are already over, the projects are incomplete, and etc., etc. We think also we have stability within parties in our side of the world, whereby once people focus their energy, like you have to focus, once you impeach people like Rigathi Gachagua or the deputy president, you have people like focusing on more on people and not necessarily against your party members stabbing you in the back. We think that's why we win this particular debate. Never been proud to propose.
And you have heard from side opposition as well. I don't know what you think about the debate that has just happened. Do you think proposition or opposition have convinced you? Do you think economic development needs to be prioritized over political reform? Feel free to share with us your opinion on X at KTN with the hashtag Campus Debates and let us know what you think. Do you think opposition or proposition is right within the first half of this round? With that, we'll be going on a short commercial break, and once we are back, we will get to hear from the second speakers of the grand finale, Strathmore University versus Kenya. Lovely, lovely, lovely to have you back for the second half of the grand finale, Strathmore University versus Kenyatta University. What has happened in the first half? Side proposition has argued that political reforms do not need to be prioritized because the most proximate issues today is economic development, and the only way to achieve that is to prioritize economic development. From side opposition, however, they argue that you cannot achieve economic development unless you have political reforms, and the only way economic development can exist is if these reforms are actually instated within society. I don't know which arguments swayed the people that were with us for the first half, but if you've just joined, we have a delicious treat from you from opposition and proposition. Without further ado, second speaker, proposition. Here, here.
So, panel, impeaching Gachagua is not the priority of Kenyans. This is because people are struggling due to the lack of money. You can't be able to go to hospitals. You cannot be able to take your children to school. As you've been told, Kiragu hasn't probably eaten because of the same issues. We think this in and of itself is bad, but it's perpetuated, and it's something which is likely to continue in the vast majority of instances, especially because of the lack of predictable pricing due to things like dependency on global networks in and of itself, means that things like global inflation, political instability, and currency devaluations of things like the dollar are always going to affect us. What we then think in the vast majority of instances is that people live lives without dignity, and it's worse because most people, as Jeff characterizes to you, cannot be able to have the guarantee that they will see tomorrow in and of itself. The worst thing about this debate is that it happens to tens of millions of Kenyans. It's not one person we are talking about, but millions of individuals are facing this scope of harm in and of itself. If the government of Kenya's incentive in this instance is re-election, then they need to prioritize individuals in this instance being able to access the level of income that they need to get from only our side. No one cares about Gachagua to the extent where they have food on their table and that sort of thing. But what you must understand about these guys is that they're out because they don't have any case, and I'm going to take everything they say, dismantle it. Even if they backload, it becomes very uncharitable for us to be able to engage within the debate. The only thing they say is that they characterize that, on our side we have Adani, high taxation, and borrowed loans, and that sort of thing. 6 responses to this. Firstly, they don't listen to Jeff's characterization. You can't literally come and create your own mechanism as to how economic prioritization would look, and then you credit them for that. You cannot be able to credit them for any of those things they mentioned, because Jeff is very specific in terms of the fiscal policies, monetary policies, and the capital raising he's talking about on our side. They create their own motion, they characterize it. You cannot be buying that from them. But the second thing is their responses are contingent on that bad characterization in and of itself. For example, they say as a result of these things like high taxation, you're going to get backlash. No, listen to me. Backlash comes as a result of people necessarily feeling that that the government necessarily does not want to, give them economic emancipation and empowerment in and of itself. To the extent where you've been starving for years, that's the reason why you're going to the street. And that's why you didn't have rich individuals storming in the street, especially because they have things to eat. To the extent where you're able to give poor people this, we think that backlash ceases on their side, or like on our side. On their side, it still continues, especially because you've chosen to focus on things like Gachagua and that sort of thing. The third thing they say is that we are going to take so many loans. Listen, we've already taken loans now. It means we have to find a way to be able to pay those loans. They have no mechanism of being able to pay those loans. In the very least, they say, oh, we'll impeach Gachagua. In the very least, we say economic development is the fastest route to be able to pay this. But the second response under this is literally, these guys, and this is why these guys lose out. The concession within the debate is that Kenyans are poor. They have to defend what mechanism they have to raise capital on their end. Because if they say, fine, we take loans, we are ready to bite the bullet, what mechanism do they have? Because to the extent where people don't have money, they equally cannot be able to do all those things they say. They could resort to high taxation. Literally, you have backlash happening worse on their side. We think it's very, very symmetric. You cannot be able to buy that in that regard. But the next thing I'm going to do is the best case versus worst case scenario. On their side, to the extent where you have like the best political change, but you don't have economic development, you don't have money, and they refuse to take loans, as their first speaker says, and that sort of thing, you still don't have any tangible change. Why? Because people don't have money in their pockets. Prioritizing something which necessarily leads to people having more money in their pockets is the best outcome which can exist. Can exist. That's in the best case where they have like the best sort of political reform and that sort of thing. The next thing here is like the Adani thing, and this is very ridiculous, especially because they say Adani, but they don't pinpoint why a public-private partnership in and of itself is bad. To the extent where the government has failed to be able to raise capital, we say they need to pinpoint the flaw in that. To the extent where we are still having our resources and that sort of thing, it can't just be that something is inherently bad when we've been able to fail to be able to sustain these resources and that sort of thing. But the final thing in terms of responses on their side is that political reforms can change tomorrow. When the government changes tomorrow, political reforms can also change. What it then means is that there's so much temporary reforms which exist on their side, and that's actively worse. They cannot be able to, ensure you sustainability and that sort of thing. Three extensions then you get. Firstly, on more political reforms on their side leads to things like ethnic tensions, like people feel like they're left out of the government. But secondly, it means that they have to take so much time. Think about Gachagua and how it has taken us 3 years of not developing as a country, just so that in the middle we can start saying, oh, we want to remove Gachagua from power and that sort of thing. The political reforms at best on their side take so much time, and we think that's actively worse. But the second thing, we think that ethnic tensions on our side can be reduced by just having a good economy. The idea that everyone feels like they are satisfied, they can be able to gain something regardless of what political regime they are in and that sort of thing. People feel they are doing well. This is exactly how individuals necessarily lose out on ethnic tension. We think it still exists on their side. But the next thing is the signal to foreigners and creditors. Listen, we signal to them that we are standing on business, tunafanya mambo, to the extent where this is something that is not just about politics. We are trying to make our systems better and that sort of thing. Weighing three things. Firstly, on the prospect of success. We think we are more likely to be successful. Look at how long it's taking them to remove people like Gachagua. 2, on urgency. And 3, we don't depend on any political forces. To the extent where tomorrow the government changes, we still survive within the debate because we have these economic reforms which are permanent. They have to defend where we must go with the temporary side. Never been prouder to go home with a trophy.
The fire is getting hotter, and I think opposition can feel it. They were ready to jump on stage immediately after the second proposition. Now, not to delay them any further, second speaker, opposition. Hear, hear.
Proposition side is a broke man trying to woo a girl by telling her how he will take her to China, buy her Louis Vuitton, buy her all the new perfumes in the world, but they are broke. Probably the phone they are using, they borrowed from their sister, and they don't have the capacity to do that. That is what proposition is. Proposition has a lot of good impacts, a lot of good harms. Oh, people are unemployed. Oh, people need work. Oh, people need money, and all of these issues. Nice. We think we could agree people need work and all of these issues. Their problem, and it's the logical gap in their case, they never prove capacity. That is their biggest flaw in their case. What is the capacity to do this? Because Shamia doesn't understand the case that comes from Emmanuel. Because the framing that comes from Emmanuel is to point out a very simple fact. They won't be able to do this because they realize the government of Kenya already tried to do this. And when they tried to do this, they said, oh, Kenya is facing a lot of inflation. Oh, we are facing a lot of debt burden. For us to develop, we need to come up with finance bill and tax women pads and tax technology and tax all of these things. And you guys rioted and you made your president to drop that finance bill. The framing from Emmanuel is to say you will need to borrow loans, you will need to increase taxation for you to do this because this is an expensive venture to do. You will need to like all of these things Emmanuel tells you. The reality is you will face backlash, people will protest, people will die, and at the end of the day, you will do what Ruto did and you will take away the finance bill like he did. You will not have the money to do this, which means again, the broke man cannot take the girl to China like they promised. They lack the capacity to do this. The comparative here is all of their benefits cannot be achieved in simple terms. The comparative here is the idea of political reforms. One, they say this takes a long time. Literally, it took us 3 days to impeach Gachagua in the National Parliament. In another 3 days, he will probably be impeached in the Senate. It's very fast. Secondly, it took Ruto like, I don't know, like 2 weeks to do the whole idea of judicial reform where he said Gen Z protesters will be compensated and their charges will be dropped and corruption cases should take no more than 6 months. This is a very easy process. It doesn't take a long time. That is a lie from them. So we say then, this is the best thing for the government of Kenya to do, especially in regards to the idea of elections, because realize the only like thing they say in regards to our case is, oh, you will get ethnic tension. Then what? They never impact this. I'm unclear. Then what is the impact from this? But beyond that, we say the idea here is, one, this is the easiest thing for the government of Kenya to do, especially if you want, I'm taking a moment, especially if you want to be re-elected, because one, you don't harm the Kenyan citizens. We can agree the Kenyan situation is bad. The advantage from opposition is we don't make it worse. That is the advantage, because in their side they say it's bad but they make it worse. So as a government of Kenya, you don't make the situation worse. That is an advantage for you as a government. Secondly, we say that this like does not take a lot of time to do, like we already said. But beyond that is that you can be able to show the change you did. Ruto can go to the people and say, I instituted a bill that makes sure government officials cannot trade with government because that is a conflict of interest, so that corruption cannot reoccur. This is a big deal for Kenyans. All of you seeing every day about corruption. What this means is he can go back to the people and say, this is what I did for you. In the comparative is building just 2 years remaining. The comparative is building a road which you will never complete, which you cannot go back to the masses and say, I built this. Probably the next guy gets to build it and take all the credit and say, I'm the guy that did this, I'm the guy that took the girl to China, not the other guy. We think this is bad for this government. But beyond that is the stability. As the government of Kenya, you need stability to work. You can't have stability if you are constantly infighting between yourselves. Oh, the president has a press conference at 4, the deputy has a press conference at 6, saying completely different things. You can't afford this as a government. You look bad to your people because you look like a government that is not united, a government that does not know what they are doing, because the president and the deputy are conflicting with each other. You need that stability. First of all, you need to project power, you need to project unity, but secondly, you need to focus on people. You can't do that if you are constantly fighting among yourselves. You need to impeach some of these people and get done with. I'll take a PY. I notice I'm the only one that takes a PY, but anyway.
Remember, Mwendo, you've been suffering for years, but the only reason you went to the streets is because the government wanted to take away more of your money. Economic reform is what pushed you, even if you've been living in shambles for the whole of your life. Defend that.
Yeah, a lot of Kenyans have been suffering for a very long time. You guys never went to protest. You went to protest the moment the government threatened to make a bad situation worse by taxing you even more. That exists on your side. We don't have that in our world because you don't make the situation worse. You lack the capacity in your world, Jeff, to achieve all of these benefits you accrue. At the end of the day, we have the capacity on our side and we are able to achieve these benefits within the required period of time. Proud to oppose.
Capacity or no capacity, proposition and opposition have been able to finalize their arguments from their second speakers. I don't know which side has swayed you. Do you think that you can take your girl to China despite being broke, or is it justified for you to take credit for it even during the process? I don't know which side has swayed you, but feel free to let us know on X at KTN Home with the hashtag Campus Debates. Do you think then that your government should prioritize economic development, or do you think political reform is the most proximate way to even achieve this economic development to begin with? We'll be going on a short commercial break, and when we are back, I think that is when we will get to know who gets to take the trophy home, who gets to win the grand final. Pulling you into an argument and proving to you why you should buy their argument more than the other side. And I think proposition and opposition have been able to do this. Summary, if this is your first time joining us, thank you, by the way, for tuning in. From side proposition, the argument is that economic development is the most proximate, but at the same time, the most urgent thing that needs to be solved within societal structures today. Regardless of whether you go to political reforms, it takes time, and the likelihood of you achieving this is very low. From side opposition, the argument is that there is no capacity for the current government to offer economic development unless it actively goes through political reforms, which is the most proximate way to deal with the biggest problems within society. That is what has happened in the first and second half, but the judges need a bit more clarity. A question to proposition and a question to opposition. Proposition?
So my question goes to proposition. Considering the corrupt nature of the government of Kenya, how do you achieve economic development without political reforms?
Question to opposition.
My question to opposition is, how can political reforms guarantee national sustainability?
Amazing question from the judges, and I'm pretty sure you have the same question as well. For side opposition, the question is, how then do you have national stability, sustainability at a point in time where you're having political reforms? Then from side proposition, the question is, if corruption still continues, how then do you have economic development? Amazing questions. I welcome speaker from side proposition, 2 minutes to give you a response and to answer the judges. Here.
So yes, so on the question on corruption, 3 responses. Firstly, corruption, if it has to be credited within the debate, is something which happens on both sides. So if anything, it becomes a wash. The second thing is on what Jeff says. He talks about how you can have legal audits on most of the projects that you're necessarily trying to do in this instance. You can be able to check in terms of things like corruption and that sort of thing. Thirdly, like literally, just follow me here. If you're building a road, regardless of whether there is corruption or not, that road is going to be there in and of itself. When you're trying to put money into people's pockets, regardless of whether there is corruption or not, that money is something which is going to benefit those people in and of itself. So we think it's something which is very, very awash within the debate. But 4 more things which make the debate more clearer for you in that regard. Firstly, it's a prioritized motion, which means that regardless of their argument on capacity, we have every right to be able to prioritize that. You cannot be buying that response. The second thing is that these guys either concede that they don't do anything economically, which means they don't get elected because of Mwendwa's own frame. He tells you about how people are very much educated today. They would know these things. So if you don't do any economic development, you don't get elected. But secondly, again, because of the proximity of the problem, people care about whether they eat tomorrow and whether they have money. To the extent where they can see you, trying to escape through politics and all those things, then you're not able to develop. The other side these guys could run is where they still have development on their side, which means they have to defend what mechanism of capital raising they have on their side, which means they still fall on our side on loans and all those uncharitable things they fall in terms of high taxation and that sort of thing. Thirdly, Kibaki didn't need to sell himself. We already knew he had tried to create jobs for the youth and all those different things. We think you're still able to get re-elected just by doing all these economic reforms. You don't have to spend your time telling people that, we've done this and that sort of thing. Fourthly, due to the nature of politics, we think their process is likely to take so much time. Which politician and which lawmaker would want to insulate, to make policies which insulate them against, this sort of, impeachment and all those different things? It's likely to take so much time, so much friction due to the nature of politicians. We think we take this debate, easy decision for the judges.
Just to confirm, the question was why political reforms ensure the country's sustainability. Okay, yeah, okay. So, in 3, 2, 1, why we ensure sustainability for the country is because for your country to function, your systems have to function first. And the only way your systems function is through political reforms. You guys remember, and they say, oh, corruption is an uncomparative, it doesn't have that much weight. You remember the scandal of somebody somewhere, I won't say who was supposed to build dams for 90 billion and that money disappeared. There are people who would be benefiting from those dams today. If that money never disappeared, that money will never disappear in our world, because we will change the systems and ensure things like corruption don't exist, because these are the biggest problems that plague the system of Kenya. The other day, your governor of Nairobi was accused of stealing, 500 billion. Imagine if that money went to the people, because we enable corruption to be eliminated. This is how you enable country to sustain itself, because you change political reforms and you get rid of things such as corruption and the like. And the second thing I would like to say here is the idea of Kibaki. You can't bring Kibaki here. Kibaki lived in a different time. We are post-COVID. We have a lot of inflation, a lot of debt crisis and so forth. This is not the same time. We can't afford to build another super highway like they're saying on their world and that sort of thing. Largely, we say that political reforms are crucial for the country. Number one, for the benefits we give you, but for your question, they ensure sustainability, because we ensure our systems are functioning to their maximum and people are actually doing their jobs and people are not just stealing from us and enriching themselves and that sort of thing. We eliminate the biggest problems that face the Kenyan people, which by the way is not economic development, is that their political systems are rotten to the core. Proud to oppose.
Amazing responses from the speakers on stage before you this evening. They've been able to debunk their arguments and actively prove to you whether you need economic development or you need economic reform. Yes. Or you need political reform. I think it's been an engaging debate from Strathmore University and Kenyatta University, both of them trying to fight for capacity to win a trophy and trying to send the other team home, which has been a consistency for all their speeches. But equally, I think the speakers have been able to personalize their arguments by mentioning the judges amazingly well. But with that, I think we need to understand from the audience what they think about the debate. I will give the audience an opportunity to ask a question to side proposition and a question to side opposition. We value our audience because I think they resonate with you at home, and they will most likely ask the question that is equally burning you. And for this, the responses you will get from the speakers are 1 minute from each side. With that, I welcome an audience speaker to ask a question.
Hi, I have a question to opposition. Considering that most likely in your world you're staying in the same way, what advancement and what forms of incentives do people have to buy into your world?
Hello. I also have a question to proposition side. My question is very simple. With the economic development as a priority, how will you deal with every problem that is still existing within the gaps in the government, like the government officials which have been seen to be squandering some of these resources. How do you prove that this is going to be possible? Thank you.
I will equally welcome our guest judge to ask a question to either team in regards to more clarity for the debate.
Thank you very much. I don't think I have a question. I might want to make a comment later. Thank you.
Amazing, amazing. I think the speakers have been able to convince our judge when it comes to their arguments. But I will allow the speakers a minute each to respond to the questions from the audience. Proposition.
I really love the question of how do you deal with gaps that existed in status quo, because this is very simple. I think this debate helps us to respond to this in two ways. Firstly, prioritization isn't a matter of capacity like we've kept reinforcing here, right? Prioritization then means all of the efforts that are existed within status quo are pushed towards solving a particular problem. Regardless of this level of success, we tell you that on our side, we have a higher likelihood of success and a higher ability to be able to create reform. These guys say Kibaki is not relevant, but you guys all enjoy Thika Superhighway today, even if the homie is not present with us right now. Oh, sorry, His Excellency is not a homie. But even secondly, right, this concept of legal audits that exist that Shamia mentioned earlier, I think it looks like three things. It looks like A, independent audits by firms that are already present within Kenya. We have Deloitte, PwC, audit firms, law firms. People have the ability to create that level of accountability. But even secondly, there exist external audits that also are present within status quo that can be able to create that level of urgency and push for the government. And lastly, and most importantly, people are rioting and people are unhappy and dissatisfied simply because their economic incentives are not protected, they're not happy, they're feeling like the government, because of those political challenges that they're talking about, or in spite of these political challenges that they're talking about, is taking more and more money from them. When you create actual, proper actual fiscal capacity and economic advancement, you create long-lasting change that transcends you, Nika, transcends you, Tracy, Fanya Mambo. You'll be happier if your country has a more stable economy. Thank you.
Okay. 3, 2, 1. The question was, what is the incentive for people to buy into our world? The citizens, that is. The incentive is that for the longest time in Kenya, the biggest problems that have plagued this country and why people keep complaining is because their systems don't work, because their systems are rotten to the core. You don't trust those people in power, you just think they'll steal your money and so forth, years and years through president and through presidents. So the incentive for them to buy in is that we fix those systems, we cater to their problems of those systems being broken and those systems being rotten. But beyond that, realize they can't work, their engagements, because they say auditing. One, for example, if you allow government politicians to do deals with government, they're literally doing deals with themselves. How do you get them to audit themselves? But secondly, if you, for example, with the reform we talk about, the idea that corruption cases should take like 6 months, short periods of time. So in their world, even if you have external audits and they take the case to court and there are no such legal reforms, that case can take 30 years. And by the end of it all, no justice ever gets done. You need legal reforms such as the ones we provide you, where we make those corruption cases faster and we make sure justice is delivered to people. Proud to oppose for the third time.
Amazing, amazing arguments from proposition and opposition. As a reminder, the motion for this round was, this House, as the government of Kenya, would prioritize economic development over political reforms. The debate has been lovely and engaging. Both of the teams have put their best foot forward to try and get the trophy and carry it home. But I think more than that, they are trying to push an idea as to whether you as the government of Kenya, provided you're watching me and us in this particular show, trying to push the idea as to whether you have the capacity to actually have economic development or whether you should prioritize having political reforms. And I think that's the most amazing thing about campus debates. We get to argue about the most proximate issues that affect me, affect you, and everyone else in society, try to provide a solution that would most benefit the majority of people within society, but at the same time to offer a thought process from a young mind and a young perspective that will most likely help shape the future or even shape our generation. Maybe in the near future, our children will not just keep saying our country is corrupt and our leaders are horrible. I think with that, you are eager to find out who has won and who has lost this debate. And I know you're waiting for me to push the microphone onto the judges for them to give you feedback. Amazing story. Drum rolls, please, guys. The winners for the grand finale Campus Debate Season 2 will not be announced today. Hang around for the next episode where we will get to show you whether Strathmore University or Kenyatta University gets to carry the trophy home. In the meantime, comment on X at KTN with the hashtag Campus Debates and tell us, who do you think culminates this entire season and who do you think gets to carry the trophy home? From Strathmore University, we have Shamia Muchesia and Jeff Melita. And from Kenyatta University, we have John Mwendwa and Emmanuel as the side opposition and as side proposition, respectfully. With that, I think you're eager to find out what Fanya Mambo has for us in regards to the comment for the round. But if you hang around for next week, Monday, 8 p.m., you will get to listen to his comment for what happened within the debate and even further nuance as to whether the government should actually prioritize economic development over political reform. From side proposition, we had Shamia Muchesia and Jeff Melita representing Strathmore University. And from side opposition, we had John Mwendwa and Emmanuel Nyongesa representing Kenyatta University.